broadcasting from the campus of Salisbury University. This is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7, putting Delmarva first. It's time for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
Perhaps one of the most interesting races on the Eastern Shore this November is that for a state Senate seat in Maryland. It pits the Democratic incumbent, Jim Mathias, against Republican delegate Mike McDermott. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. It's not like they are unfamiliar with each other before moving into the Maryland State Senate. Mathias was a longtime mayor of Ocean City. Meanwhile, McDermott was mayor of Pocomoke City. When Mathias left the House of Delegates in 2010 to go on to the state Senate, he was succeeded by McDermott. But with legislative redistricting in the House of Delegates, the two men now find themselves battling out for the state Senate seat this November. And in our studios this morning are Senator Jim Mathias and Delegate Mike McDermott. I appreciate you both coming in.
Good morning, Don.
Thanks, Don.
Well, let's start with you, Jim. Why is it that people should be voting for the incumbent, which always has a great track record, to pick over? What is it that you're offering people that they should continue to have?
Effective leadership, effective results. If you take a look around the district and around the Eastern Shore, in the most difficult of economic times, look what we have been able to deliver and bring back here for the people of the Eastern Shore. We can talk about projects this morning. If you come over to the campus and look at the Commons, we can go down to UMES, look at the Aviation Engineering Building, go over to Warwick Community College, look at the Allied Health Building, look at the different things we've been able to do, go into our different communities, look at our schools, Snow Hill High School, James M. Bennett, go down, look at the library under construction down in Crisfield, and then look at what happened with Hurricane Sandy when they were devastated. We were able to bring our alliances and our team together, be able to work them through that devastation. So all that, and you'll hear a little bit perhaps this morning about spending and the like. But, I just would like to ask the listeners, because they're the most important folks here today, they're the ones that are educated and get out and vote, to let's not just come into the middle of the movie here. Let's go back and look where we've been from an economic perspective, the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. And here we're able to continue and go forward, doing the job for the people of the Eastern Shore. This isn't about party. This is about the people of the Eastern Shore, and that's what I represent and vote for every day.
So, Mike, usually these elections, particularly against an incumbent, they are a referendum often on the incumbent. So why is it that people should be voting for you and not voting for Jim Mathias?
I think Jim's right. I think we ought to go back and look at the last 8 years since he and Martin O'Malley have been taking care of the things in Maryland and since his election to the House of Delegates and then as a senator. And look at the record and look at the fact that 8 years ago we had a surplus in Maryland. 8 years ago we were ranked number 26 in business friendliness. 8 years ago we had 11 Fortune 500 companies in this state. 8 years ago we had jobs on the Eastern Shore. Poultry was thriving. There was a good promise and a future with our kids. Our schools were highly rated. Everything was really good 8 years ago. I fast forward that now after 8 years of the senator being in office with the O'Malley-Brown administration and him working with them on all these projects that we have. Most of the things that he talked about are debt-laden projects. It represents debt that's brought back to the shore. And the bottom line is we're no longer number 26. We're now number 42. Our economy last year was 49th in the nation. We are flat. We're not growing anything. We have lost every Fortune 500 company save McCormick Foods in Baltimore City, and they're looking to move to Pennsylvania. When you look at an economy that's in such peril like that, the one thing that I heard out of my Democrat colleagues every election cycle for the last 12 years is about how we need jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. I've heard it out of the senator's own mouth that was going to be priority number one. And quite frankly, what we've got is shuttered former businesses. We've got retail complexes that are empty. We've got mom and pops that are closed on the shore. And the only thing I heard about him this morning talking about why we need to put him back up there is because of things that start with these 5 words: creation of a state debt. And we got plenty of state debt. And last week we heard about how we're $500 million in the hole going into 2015. That spending affordability is going to crush us as a state. And that's not a record I'd be particularly proud of.
What about that, Jim?
Well, let me ask my opponent, where have you been for the last 3.5 years? if things are so horrible, terrible, where have you been? You've occupied the seat over in the House. Let me see what you've accomplished. Let me see where your colleagues have worked. With all due respect, we work together bipartisan across the lines. You know, we could talk about, if we want to talk about what we're doing here, we could talk about Cadista. We can talk about the language that we secured in the budget to absolutely be able to protect our poultry industry. The phosphorus management tool that was fast-tracked this time last year that we were able to stop. Let's talk a little bit about the Chinese delegation that was here and just bought Court Plaza in Temple Hills. These are the type of things that we go forward. The ribbon cuttings, respectfully, that I've been to up and down the small pharmacies and the like here. There is confidence in our area. There is small enterprise here, but absolutely, we have more work to do. And again, I'm not going to sit here and go take my opponent to task. But look, we've always had a rainy day fund here. We have it now. But let's talk about our bond rating agencies. We still maintain one of 10 states our AAA bond rating. Now, that will be diminished perhaps here in a moment by this or by that. But the fact of the matter is that we have shown the courage to do what we have to do in extremely difficult times for the most important thing, and that's our people. To educate our citizens, to make sure that our children have a great future, to keep higher education affordable, to keep our roadways safe, to protect our environment, and balance all that with a great financial future here that we're working hard to do. When we go from 26 to 48 or 49, we have the Augustine Commission. We have the top leadership here making sure that we will continue to work and make Maryland a better place to come and do business. That's my number one priority, is rural prosperity and making sure that we are business friendly here, that we are competing with Delaware and Virginia right here on the Eastern Shore and other states. This isn't just a national competition today. It's an international, global competition today. So, I mean, that's where we are. You know, quite frankly, is it all horrible, terrible? Look, we got work to do, but I like to say that we're moving forward and getting the job done, and I ask for people's vote and their confidence.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to follow up with this, Jim, because one of the themes of Mike's campaign has been to tie you to the O'Malley administration. How to respond to that? Are you proud of what that administration has accomplished? Or have you been a critic? What's your relationship? Because he has made that clearly an issue in this campaign.
Well, I mean, again, that's my opponent talking. I voted against every O'Malley tax increase, since I've been in the Senate. When you look at the rain tax and you look at the alcohol tax and you look across the spectrum of what's been done, the gas tax and the like, we voted against it. We've argued against it. That's been diminished because supposedly I've been given a pass. You're not given a pass when you have character. You vote the heart and soul of what you believe in. I think our governor has done some good things, absolutely, but there's some social issues that I firmly disagree with. I voted against the gun bill, respectfully. I voted against the same-sex marriage. Why is that? Because our district didn't believe in it. When you look at the referendum, the entire Eastern Shore did not believe in it. When I go to work every day, not 90 days, 365 days a year around the clock, and that has been the reputation I've earned. I go to work every day for the people of the Eastern Shore. I represent the Eastern Shore. On the other hand, I worked and supported all the renewable energy bills. When we look what we've done, when we think we finally got it right with offshore wind, we voted for that. It's going to bring opportunity here. But you know what? It's not going to cost the people, the citizens of Maryland, anything until we go through the Public Safety Commission and they deem it to be a net positive benefit. We worked and were persuasive with the governor with overriding the veto of the land-based wind turbines in Somerset. Local government absolutely will have their say at the table, and they're working through it right now with planning and zoning. But we took that state obstruction away. We hear so much about the state obstructing business. Well, this was a $40 to $45 million revenue for Somerset County that this bill would have obstructed, and we were able to get that obstruction out of the way. So, look, I've worked with the administration. I've worked against the administration's issues, but I've worked for the most important thing, and that's the people of the Eastern Shore for their benefit every day, and will continue to do so.
What about that, Mike?
He hasn't stopped the PMT. He likes to talk about that. He's only postponed, and quite frankly, it's an election year gimmick. It's been postponed till after the election. O'Malley Brown is going to move forward with the PMT. And for people that don't know a lot about that on the shore, maybe you're not involved in poultry farming, it's going to crush our local economy if we're not able to deal with our poultry litter issues right here on the shore. It's going to be a huge deficit to us. So to say that somehow that's been put off or something that he's dealt with. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Although, what about this idea though, that in some issues, some ways he's agreed with him, but then on other issues
well, I
he's
just
disagreed.
listened to him talk for 5 minutes about areas, and I got to tell you, he is a big apologist for the O'Malley Brown administration. He says he didn't vote for the rain tax. That's absolutely not true. You know, he voted for cloture, Don. And maybe people don't realize what cloture is, but cloture is when the minority party is fighting a bill because they're holding the floor. It's called a filibuster, and they're fighting to keep that bill from coming out. They don't want it. And the only thing that the minority party can do is hold the floor and hopefully argue it away and make their points and not allow the Senate to move forward with it. This senator votes with his party every time for cloture. And he voted for cloture on the rain tax. There was an amendment that was put forward by Senator Pipkin, the minority leader at the time. And that amendment would have put a sunset on the rain tax and said it's going to go away in a couple of years without action on the General Assembly's part. Again, the senator voted with his party and voted against that amendment. Now, that's 2 votes for the rain tax. Now, he sits here this morning and says, I didn't vote for that tax, but he votes for all these other things, the amendments that would have made something better. He votes against them. Cloture, he votes for it. All those things amount to a record where he's siding with the O'Malley Brown administration. He's taking sides with his party every time. This idea of being bipartisanship, that's ridiculous. He asked me where I've been for the last 3.5 years. I've been voting against their budgets while he's been voting for them. He has voted to increase spending while he's been in the General Assembly over 29% more spending right now than it was when he walked in the door. And how he can sit there and think that that's not the cause of some of our problems and the deficits that we deal with, that's a credit card on your grandchildren's back future, and that is nothing to be proud about.
Let me go to Jim. So outline exactly what the rain tax is, and what did you do? Did you vote for or against?
I voted against it. Absolutely.
Ask him how he voted on cloture.
I'm sorry. Do I have the floor here, or are we going to be abruptly
well, why don't you answer the question, and we'll go with that.
Don, you want to take the microphone?
Go ahead. So explain a little bit about what the rain tax is and what you did in the state legislature.
All right. Well, first of all, the Eastern Shore is exempt from it. It takes the high-density areas within the state, and it mandates a certain fee tax be charged so they can provide the infrastructure necessary to keep the rain, or not the rain, to keep the waterfall from going into to the watersheds and the rivers and the like. And I voted against it. It was a very, very difficult. We're in a very difficult economy. You know, I voted no. When we talk about cloture, it's a procedural bill. It limits the debate. I stand corrected, but I think it was like April 1st. It was early in April. We had a lot of on the agenda, and what we didn't have yet was a budget. And that's the year that we adjourned without the budget. We've had our debate. The bill was in committee. It came to the floor. It had aggressive debate, and it was time to move on so we could get the rest of the job done for the citizens of the state of Maryland. So with regard to cloture, which would have limited debate, yes, I voted against limiting debate. I voted for limiting debate,
yeah.
But I voted against the bill, and that's the truth. And it wasn't because of any other reason that I believed to be opposed to it. Our economy is struggling, having an extremely difficult time, and what we didn't need was more taxes and more fees on top of our struggle to recover.
So I'm assuming, by the way, that Mike would be suggesting that you should just simply filibuster so that you don't have a vote. Is this what I'm? Is this a parliamentary issue that's going on here?
Precisely, and you'd have to ask him that when it gets to the minutia. But the one error, quite frankly, again, he says it's when the minority party. It's not true. It's when the opposition to the bill tries to control the floor. And see, this is not about minority and majority. This is about being effective and working together. So when the opposition to a bill controls the floor and wants to maintain the floor, either to ultimately persuade or lobby another vote or just stop the process, that's called a filibuster. And what I made my decision to do was carry the business of the state forward. We were going to adjourn in a few days. We did not have a budget. There were other issues there. I don't have the legislative record of what all was yet to be done in 2012, but we have to move forward. We have to move forward. You see how our country is paralyzed. You see what's happened here, and I am not a part of paralyzing our state.
I want to turn to you, Mike, for a moment, because one of the things you talk about, obviously, is the economic situation that was, say, 8 years ago as it is now. But one of the things that we all are quite aware of is that we've been moving through the Great Recession, probably the worst recession since the Great Depression. The collapse of the stock market by half. 750,000 jobs are being lost per month as the Obama administration came in. people were struggling to figure out how to keep the banks alive. And we saw an unemployment rate that shot up to over 10% nationally. So how do you square that with where the state is now? What would you have done differently, for example, to cope with this kind of Great Recession? Because it's one thing to say, okay, well, things are worse. They were worse then than they are now. But we also had this great intervening event that took place.
Sure, and let's finish this cloture discussion, because if you're in the opposition party, which the senator claims he is in the opposition party because he says he voted against the bill. Well, if you're in the opposition party, then you would not want cloture. So I'll just let that rest. You know, the debate, the reason you stop debate and the reason you do it at the end of the session is because you know so many senators in there want their bills to move forward, and that's the power of using the filibuster, is it makes them move on to other things and stop something that's bad. In this case, because he votes with them, they get to vote on the bill. Now, as far as the economy is concerned, you know, we didn't get to be 49th in the country because of a lack of effort. Our efforts are just in the wrong direction. You know, the minority party in the House has offered amendments and bills every year. We've offered our own budgets to the Maryland General Assembly that would have limited our spending. We've offered many times. I've offered bills to cut corporate rates back and make us more competitive. We've offered bills to cut the income tax rate, which is where most small businesses pay their taxes and issues to the government. We've offered to cut the regulatory burdens and the environment through the Division of Licensing and Labor and work on issues that would actually strengthen us as an economy is concerned. The reason we're number 49th, and we join 13 other states in this country that are likewise situated, economies that are not growing and are flat. If your revenues are flat in a state like Maryland, it's your own fault because we have all the resources in the world. His party won't go after natural gas trapped in shale up in the mountain regions. That is a huge buster for us when it comes to our energy policy. We won't do the things that would make us profitable as a state. And if you're not attractive, you know, North Carolina was even worse than we are, Don. They were number 46 in business friendliness. They got a conservative legislature and a conservative governor, and they turned that around. They started cutting taxes. They started looking at ways to improve their economy. They cut the fees and regulations. They got off the backs of businesses. And guess what? They moved up to number 17 in the country when it comes to being business friendly. That's just below Delaware. We're competing around us. The lowest state around us that we're competing with as far as this economic growth is concerned is it's coming in the 20s. So we're 20 points behind our neighbors. And you can't continue to do the things that we've been doing for 8 years while these guys have been making the decisions about what our budgets look like, what our spending looks like, and how we're going to grow this economy in a state where we're failing. If we're going to judge it on the record, they have failed to produce what they said they would do. We need to get some new leaders and new direction.
Jim?
Well, let's kind of say this. We can go this morning, and I don't have it right here with me,
Sure.
And we can find data that says how Maryland is at the lead of certain elements of business and the like. I will take the constructive criticism here and go to work with it. Do I want to take, just like when Maryland's higher education, where our tuitions in Maryland were in the highest, and we were able to take the measures to bring them down to the middle of the pack by freezing tuitions and capping them at 3%, that when I hear these numbers, I want to see what we can do better. I've already mentioned about the Augustine Commission here this morning. This is what we're doing. This is how we're moving forward. And you know, the data is what the data is, but so is opportunity what it is today. If you look around the Eastern Shore and you look at the monies that are being invested here, sure, there's some commercial properties that are vacant and being certainly aggressively marketed, but I've already talked about the Court Plaza this morning. Currently in Ocean City, tourism is a tremendous industry here on the Eastern Shore. We have up to 4 hotels under construction there. People want to be here. They want to be on the Eastern Shore. They want to enjoy our clean environment. And again, I turn to my opponent and say, where have you been for 3.5 years? I mean, to be in here this morning and to be out on the campaign trail for the last 6 months and say how terrible and destructive we've been, we find some compromise. You know, when you watched the Orioles game last night and they jumped out by 2 runs and the next thing you know, Detroit was back, and it was a tied game. You have to work harder. When you see your challenges, you have to work harder. You don't sit and criticize and throw things at people on the field. You know what you do? You get in there, you roll up your sleeves, and you get the job done, and that's what I've been able to do. That's what I will continue to do. I've already said about business competitiveness, certainly making sure that our economy becomes even more robust as we go forward. We're talking about making sure that the people on the Eastern Shore get what more than they deserve. And I've already talked about some projects here this morning that we will continue to deliver when, and I ask for their vote again, our citizens reelect me to the Senate.
How do you respond, by the way, Tim, how do you respond to this idea that what we're looking at as a state legislature and a governor for that matter, that is spending more than that we should? Well, because that's what essentially Mike is saying.
I understand that the spending matter, and when you talk about our $2 billion plus structural deficit that had, we brought it down just about to zero. And again, we hear about this. The comptroller came out with the $409 million the shortfall in the revenues. Look, we don't stand alone here. We're very close to Washington D.C. with what's going on over there, with the downturns in employment and how they're affecting us. Certainly, we've reduced spending when we stayed within spending affordability. We brought our spending down, and I will tell you, I'm certain that there have been, if we have to talk about party labels, I'm certain that there have been Republican ideas have been addressed in our budget where we've reduced spending. We've taken fixed quotas, or there was spending in our budgets that had to grow by a certain amount every year. We've brought that down under the leadership, the financial leadership of both the House and the Senate. We will continue to do that. I mean, look, I like to come in here this morning and just talk about good news, but the fact of the matter is, look, there are challenges. There are challenges, and we will meet those challenges the way we have. I'll go back one more time when we talk about spending, and I'll talk about our bond rating agencies, how we have been one of only 10 states that have been able to keep our AAA bond rating. And they believe that when we sell our bonds, that they are absolutely going to be paid back for these public projects that we need to continue to thrive as a state. They believe in our financial integrity. I believe in Maryland. I believe in the Eastern Shore, and I believe that we're going to continue to work hard to keep people coming to Maryland and the Eastern Shore with affordance and knowing what their taxes are going to be, what their tax vulnerability is going to be, both as a citizen and as a business.
Mike, I want to turn to you because one of the things that struck me about the idea about cutting spending and so on, particularly, or the tax increases that have been made in order to try to create some spending options for the state, is that when I cover local government, I hear all the time how they've lost state dollars, particularly in road, for instance, road improvements wiped out. And one of the things that's always struck me is that when you talk about cuts in state spending, that you often find that it impacts the local governments. It's true not only this state, it was true of California where I come from. What do you say to those local governments? You say, well, we're going to cut spending, and guess what? You know, that big chunk, some 80% perhaps maybe of your road repair is gone. I mean, it sounds like the burden is being shifted as opposed to, say, money that's coming from, say, very highly populated areas, like, say, for instance, Baltimore. Money will come from them, and then they'll be shifted to here because, say, to deal with roads. And so what do you say to those local leaders?
Well, Don, only a liberal who has voted to raise taxes and spending by over $10 billion in the last 8 years, only a guy that's done that can sit here and talk about how we've reduced spending, okay? I'll be the first to tell you. The General Assembly's budgets have increased by over $1 billion a year. How is that reducing your spending? To me, reduced spending means I spend less than I spent last year. That's reduced spending. Okay? That's cutting your spending. We don't cut spending in Annapolis. That is an absurd thought. And that, like I said, you have to be from the mentality that you're going to increase spending every year, and that if you reduce the amount that you're going to increase it, somehow that's a cut. And that is a ridiculous misnomer. So, for instance, we have not cut any spending in Annapolis. As far as local governments are concerned, the burden is back on the local governments because the state keeps transferring wealth. It's not that we don't collect enough in gas tax revenues, but when they take over $1 billion out of the so-called trust fund and use it to fill gaps in their holes in their spending because they won't cut spending, then our local governments don't get the money brought back to them. And as a mayor, we used to have a budget in Pocomoke City where $350,000 a year came to us from our share of local road money. That went down to $35,000 when the governor decided that he needed that money more than we did. And you can look around at local roads and see the cost of that. We have tried, the Republican Party has tried every year since they cut that fund to give that money back to local government. And every year it gets thwarted because that money's not going to come back. They've given them out in little stipends. They've thrown a little bit here. They gave some more to the cities this year, but they didn't give any to the counties. It's a ridiculous little tax and spend game that they have in Annapolis. They don't have the money. And you just heard, if we're that far in the hole right now, and they talk about this AAA bond rating, Don, the only thing that means in the bond market is that Maryland will tax anybody, any amount, anytime. And because we're willing to tax our people and cover our debts with our own people's taxes, then they're going to give us a AAA because we're good on our debt spending. We're going to pay you back. It's just where we get it that's a problem for Marylanders.
Jim, by the way, what about the transportation fund?
Well, if you take a look at the Sun paper, if you're talking about a couple different things, Transportation Trust Fund, just about all those monies, and every governor over the last 30-some years has done what was done here. If you take a look at that, this is something that was done uniquely by a certain party. It's been done by all governors, and it's been done with the ebb and flow of our revenue stream. If you take a look at the Sun paper and the analysis, there was just an editorial this week that most of that Transportation Trust Fund money has been paid back. Most of it. Now, the highway user money, that's not the case. And we've already talked twice in our time together this morning about the devastation in this economy. And some decisions had to be made so that we did not raise taxes. And we went to the Maryland Association of Counties. I wasn't part of the conversation, and they were given a choice, either to take some of the piggyback tax money or the highway user money. Now, the Maryland Association of Counties, and it's on the record, made the decision to allow the state to take the highway user money. Now, granted, they didn't think that the downturn would be quite as deep or sustained, but that's the fact. Now we are working. We are working to restore it. We have been fortunate to restore some of the monies back to the municipalities, and I give my pledge, and I have, and this is not an election pledge. This is a true, genuine commitment that I've given, and when you look at what I've said I've done, and you can look at my record, that we're going to work to phase back in that highway user money. We're working to do that. So that's where we are. That's why we're there. That's how we're working to remediate that and go forward. But I just also want to say one thing about the bonds and the like. And, you know, when you say that just means that, and my opponent says that just means you'll just tax anybody anywhere. No, what the bond rating agencies, when they come in, they assess your fiscal integrity. The long-term fiscal integrity. Yes, your ability to pay, but to do so that your citizens, businesses, industries, and like your revenue producers within the state are able to pay and continue to thrive and flourish over a long time. These bonds are led over a 15-year period. This isn't just a snapshot in time that they'll just tax anybody anywhere. That's a gross error in remark and very, very disappointing to hear.
Let me turn you back, because one of the things we mentioned earlier in the conversation is about the structural deficit that we had, some $2 billion. Whether you like or not like the Democrats and certainly the governor decided they were going to take a particular approach. So what is it that you would have done to deal with a $2 billion deficit? And how would you mitigate the impact if all you were to say rely upon were, say, budget cuts or spending cuts? Because whenever you cut spending, it really does dramatically affect the local governments and people in general. How would you personally and you as a party approach dealing with that structural deficit as opposed to what the governor did?
The conservative approach to government is, first of all, is to limit the size and scope of government in people's lives. And what that does is it promotes liberty and prosperity in the free market. So when your free market begins to prosper because you're getting off of their backs, when you're not over-regulating, when it takes 18 months for a farmer to get a poultry house online in your state, and it takes 3 months to get a poultry house online in a neighboring state, you can understand why the free market shifts to another state, because time is money in business. When you over-regulate and you punish businesses, that creates an environment that does not promote prosperity within your state. Now, if you lack revenue in your state portfolio, it's because you need to look at where you're prospering and where you're not. We're not prospering when it comes to businesses. We're not growing our economy. If you're sitting here as a senator and you can't understand that we are 49th for our economy, that it was flat, we are not growing, You have got to do more than just talk about jobs. You've got to look at what you're doing, because what you're doing is flawed. Republicans believe that if the economy grows, look around us. We're the only state here that's having this problem locally. If your economy is growing, if it is prospering, the revenues flow naturally into your revenue collectors.
So how would you deal, though, with that structural deficit?
You would deal with it. Listen, first of all, we wouldn't have been in the structural deficit that we're in if the folks that are up there making these decisions, like the senator, would have cut spending. If you're not increasing revenues, you have to cut your spending, and you have to stop spending more money. It's simple as that. You stop spending money. Stop running up the credit card bill. Stop all these different things that you're doing with tomorrow's dollars. We shouldn't be asking our grandkids to make these payments. We're starting to actually pay for operational expenses out of our credit card account. You can't operate like that. Nobody's household can operate like that. You're asking me to answer one side of this question. I'm telling you that you have to have a robust economy, because you've got to pull your way out of this through the private sector. The government spending is not pulling us out.
Wait, is there any particular program, a set of programs, services you think that should be cut from Maryland to say, have dealt with this deficit?
Well, Don, the first thing you could do is you could say, look, our economy's not growing, our revenues aren't growing, so we need to absolutely make sure that our budget projections match our revenue stream. That's number one. That way you're not going further in debt. And then as you make these changes to your business policy, as your tax and your fee and your regulatory environment changes, you begin to grow your revenue stream, and then you're able to retire your debt.
But there's no particular area that's spending that you would say cut. Or any program that you would think would eliminate.
You've got to look at, this is a $36 billion budget. You've got to look across the broad stream of it and say, look, we've got to reduce the spending levels. We can't afford to increase. And that's what we're doing. We're increasing spending every year. So first thing you have to do is you have to stop spending money. You've got to stop, and you've got to reflect on where you are and the reality of your situation, and then look at how you can grow your revenue stream so that it is better for government in the end.
Jim?
Oh, well, first of all, again, we did exactly that. What we did when we went in and we addressed our structural deficit, I've already said, reduced our formula spending. We brought it down. We brought that $2 billion structural deficit that had been inherited over a number that can't have been kicked down the road over a number of governors' leaderships. We have the strongest governor in the United States of America, where he makes the budget and sends it to the legislature, and all that we can do is cut. And we have done that. We've done it through cutting formula spending. We've done reductions. You'll hear certain folks say that they were very saddened by the things that were cut. You've already heard about the highway user monies that have been taken away and put in to help balance our budget so we can provide education, provide help for our disabled folks, making sure that mental health and all are addressed out here. When you look at the Medicaid needs throughout our state, look, we don't stand alone. We're in all this together. When we talk about having a robust economy, I just want to say one thing. You just take a look at what I gave you. The Maryland Farm Bureau endorsed me. This isn't me sitting here talking to you. This is the dedicated industry of farming in Maryland have assessed my record and said, we believe that Senator Mathias deserves our support. National Federation of Independent Business, not only in Maryland, 320,000 businesses throughout the United States of America. I was a business owner for over 30 years. I signed the front of the paycheck. I get it. They understand it. They endorsed me and said, we will work with you because we believe in you. The Maryland Association of Realtors endorses me. When you look at some of the most significant industries, farming, small business, tourism, real estate, when the mortgage interest deduction was to be struck from the governor's budget, we went immediately to work and within a matter of days had it restored. I do not, we've already talked about this morning, I do not agree with this administration on a number of their decisions, and I've fought for the people of the Eastern Shore and for the people of Maryland against that. And when you look at these business organizations and the like, and we can talk some more and look at their assessment of this race, they believe that my record stands strong solid and effective in the work that we've done. And now, as we continue to develop more priorities, and that's our spending and our affordability, I will look to those bond agencies, but I'll also look to our affordance here on the Eastern Shore and throughout Maryland and continue to make those solid, conservative fiscal decisions, but effective decisions.
Turning to you, Mike, because one of the things that I was looking at your website and so on, you make the claim where you say that when it comes to business groups, Matthias gets a 54% rating as opposed to yourself, which gets a 93% rating. So one of the questions is, so who are those business groups? What are we talking about here? Because we just heard just a moment ago that the senator has gotten a number of endorsements from business folks. What is it?
Yeah, it was a great commercial.
How do we fit that
It was
together?
a great commercial. The Maryland Businesses for Responsive Government, they don't give out endorsements. They simply rate you on your record. And that's why the senator has a failing record. Because when you rate him on his record, it's a failing. It's a 54 lifetime rating. Mine is 93%. The reason for that is simple. It's about how you vote, and on those particular bills, how you voted. And I think his record is something that's worthwhile of discussion. There's a reason why he has a failing record when it comes to that.
So
there's also there's a reason why he has, looking at a half a page of endorsements from different political organizations and people that get directed to give money to campaigns. I totally get that. But guess what? I have the endorsement of farmers. I have the endorsement of people that are out there that actually care about where we're going, not just bureaucrats that are looking about where they're going to spend PAC money. That's just the idea that somehow we're supposed to listen to a bunch of people that have got us into this problem in the first place, okay, is ridiculous. We've got to look out on the horizon and say their way of doing things, their philosophy of government has failed Marylanders. What the senator has chosen to believe and the way that he's chosen to work things out in the Maryland General Assembly for the last 8 years has failed Marylanders. We are not moving our economy forward. You can't be proud of the way that Maryland is sitting economically. And because everything, he likes to talk about education. Well, I'll tell you what I'm tired of, Don. We supplement the educational expenses in this state by 50%. Half of the money that it costs to send a kid to UMES or to Salisbury University, the state picks up half of that tab. And you know what? If you're going to pick up half the tab as a taxpayer, then you want to see a return on your investment in this state. I don't want to see a return on my investment in North Carolina or Delaware or West Virginia. My daughter graduated from SU. She tried for a year to get a job here in Maryland in her field. Now she's down in North Carolina prospering in Charlotte. We are exporting our kids. We're exporting our future wealth. We're exporting our future entrepreneurs. All of these people are leaving our state because we are failing. We're not only failing right now on our revenue stream, we're failing our future revenues, and that means you and I are going to be visiting our grandchildren in another state other than Maryland.
Jim?
Well, certainly. Look, I'm not going to become emotional and make these remarks about calling people this and that, bureaucrats. I'm going to sit here and call the National Federation of Independent Business. I'm going to call them bureaucrats.
Well, no, you can call them that.
I'm going to call them. No, you've already called them that this morning. No, and by the way, I think you're a sheriff. The FOP. With the FOP endorsement, you're going to call your colleagues bureaucrats.
I think the unions
and the Farm
absolutely
Bureau
endorse you, Senator.
Every
union endorses you.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
I'm sorry. Again, you
get their endorsement. That's
Jim.
okay.
Okay, Jim.
Don, respectfully, can I go forward?
Go ahead.
Okay. Now, this is what you have on the House floor. This is why my colleague drives people out, because respectfully, he doesn't know how to work with people. He can't even.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
He can't even coexist in this room this morning on a rational, intelligent discussion. So, to stay on point here, I think the strongest endorsement that I have is that of people, of our constituents, and the constituency work that we do every day. And we can talk about that, but that's the most important thing. I respect these organizations and the people that belong to them, and I respect their objectivity. Look, when you take one organization and set them as your example, you take one set of statistics and set that as an example, that's very, unfortunately, narrow-minded and closed-minded. I take a broad spectrum. You can look around our state today. You look at how robust we are and how we're moving forward. But we know that we have challenges, and I have an exceptional record of accomplishment for the people of the Eastern Shore, of being independent, of voting against the leadership of my party when it's critically important for our needs here on the Eastern Shore, and I would continue to do that.
I want to turn to agriculture because there was a quote, by the way, that was this week attributed to Jim Perdue. And he said, basically, as I understand it, the poultry industry, he doesn't feel the poultry industry has a seat at the table in Maryland when it comes to environmental regulations. Very stark. I'm going to turn to you first, Jim.
Sure.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, I don't want to disagree with Jim, but Jim was talking about the regulations, and respectfully, I think Jim has been very effective. Again, not to sit here and talk about certain newspapers or like, but the Sun paper came back and illustrated a number of things where agriculture, where poultry has been very effective. I've talked about the phosphorus management tool, where this thing was going down a fast track to being approved, and we've been able to stop it. And if you want to diminish that, if you like, that's fine. But Dr. Memo Derricker has been engaged in a tremendously comprehensive economic impact statement. I do believe that poultry and agriculture has a seat at the table. I have given them that voice. I have given an effective voice at the table for the Eastern Shore and the citizens of the Eastern Shore. Now, again, as I've already said here earlier, do I think that it can be improved upon? Absolutely. Quite honestly, I was driving down the road 2 Fridays ago and coming back from Salisbury when I heard that report, and I called Perdue, as I always do, to all my constituents, and I made a U-turn and came back over here, and I found out where he was at Leadership Maryland, right on this campus. And we went in and we sat down, immediately responsive. But I'm not responsive, I'm proactive. He has a seat at the table. We have met, we will continue to meet, and I will make certain that agriculture, grain, poultry, and the like is protected here on the Eastern Shore, as well as small business, as well as education, as well as our veterans who deserve and have earned a seat at the table.
By the way, let me ask you, can you give us any sense about what he said to you after when you met with him?
Well, he said that was his opinion, quite frankly. He and the CEO, McCormick, were there, and he said, look, Jim, I didn't want to create a controversy, but that was my opinion. Look, leaders have strong opinions. Jim is a very strong, very successful leader. But Jim also knows that when he needs the support, when he needs leadership, he reaches out to me, and we are there, and we have been there. And I can tell you that we have a very strong record to represent agriculture. And within a matter of, as I said, 45 minutes, I was sitting right there with him. And not from a reactionary perspective, but from a proactive, effective perspective, and that's how I work and represent the people of the Eastern Shore effectively.
Mike, I want to turn to you because the whole issue really has to do with a very unique situation here on the Eastern Shore, and because we sit next to the largest estuary, the Chesapeake Bay, and one of the issue that comes up is how you balance environmental concerns on the one hand and farming concerns on the other. How do you balance those? And where, for instance, what is your position, say, for instance, on the pollution diet to cut back on the amount of pollution, both not only from cities and growth, but also from agriculture?
Well, Don, the reason that President Perdue doesn't feel like he has a seat at the table is because he earned that way to feel that way. Poultry, our farming, all of our farm families feel under attack in this state. And quite frankly, to describe our state and our local economy as robust, as the senator has, is not only a stretch, it's actually living in a fairy tale. Our farmers certainly don't feel like they're respected in Annapolis. Our watermen don't feel like they're respected in Annapolis. You want to talk about balance and the EPA diet? Our farmers have already exceeded that. They're way ahead of that by a couple of years ahead of what their expectations were. And yet they become the focus of further regulations while this same administration and the same EPA won't even go up and touch the Conowinga Dam. They don't want to go up and deal with the real sediment issues that we have. While we're doing this on the Eastern Shore and our farmers are excelling, while our water quality on our counties that touch the bay on the lower shore is in the B+ range, when we've got that kind of effort going on and we have millions of gallons of raw sewage coming into us from Baltimore City and the Western Shore, how is it that our farmers don't feel like they're being put under somebody's thumb, forced to deal with regulatory environments that are going to raise their costs exponentially and drive some of their families out of business and drive their kids away from farming in our future? If that's the case, we talk about the environment. Our farmers are the conservationists here. The watermen are the conservationists here. Their whole life depends on prospering on their fields. If they don't take care of the land, if the watermen don't take care of the waterways, they're not going to prosper and there will be no future for them. It is counterintuitive to think that they're somehow out there polluting purposely to destroy it. We've got to get the other factors lined up and deal with those issues before we ask our farming community or our watermen and their families to do one more thing when it comes to a regulation. The senator opted to increase their fees on the watermen by sometimes 400%. And we've got families that are struggling. They need something more out of government than more fees and more taxes.
Jim, I want to respond to you. I ask you to respond to that. Also, and how do you balance this issue between the environment on the one hand, the issue we have to deal with, pollution that's run off into the Chesapeake Bay, and farming? And by the way, where do you stand on the pollution diet?
Well, first of all, I want to tell you you're exactly right with our estuary, and we have to make sure that we protect both farming and our water quality. And certainly I've been opposed to the phosphorus management tool. You've heard that I've gone ahead and I voted against the rain tax and the like. So I think that the farming, if we go isolate it right to farming, they have done their part. And because we're opponents in this election doesn't mean we disagree on everything. I do agree that the farming community has done beyond their fair share. I do believe that this was rushed into, and that's why I had that language put in the budget. I do believe that when you look at what the soil content is, it does not equate to what the runoff and the migrations of the waterways are. I do believe all that. I do believe that our large wastewater treatment plants account for a degrading of our water quality. And I do believe and have voted for appropriations towards that end to upgrade them and language that required them to be become more efficient across the way, as well as septic systems and the like here on the Eastern Shore. We have done all that. When you look at a serious problem, there are comprehensive answers, a comprehensive solution, and we work towards that. So we've talked about some of those things already here this morning, and we will continue to go move forward. But I think it's absolutely critical. When I see what happened to the Hudson farm, I mean, that was absolutely criminal. Absolutely criminal what happened to Alan and Kristen. I stood up on the floor on April 1st of 2010. You can go to the record and said, we can't try this case here today, but you will see that is not poultry litter, that I had biosolids from the town of Ocean City. And that was criminal. The anxiety, the fear, the monies and the like that it descended upon that family was wrong, and it radiated across to the whole industry. That right there alone broke down the progress that we were making with groups like the Maryland Coastal Bays, how they were working together with developers and industry and farming and the like. And everybody, just like when you have a polar attitude, and I think you've heard some of that polarity here today, when you have that kind of a polar atmosphere and you approach things from a polar position, you have a complete breakdown. I have always been there to work with people and work for people. Now, if I could take a moment, I heard a remark here about raising the watermen's licensing by 400%. I just want to make sure that the record is clear that there was a work group where the working watermen and the organizations that represented them agreed to that, so they could recover the monies, so that the state would be able to continue to go forward and keep those waterways bountiful and the like. That was a consented upon decision with the Department of Natural Resources and the working watermen and the organizations that they belong to.
I want to turn to the issue of guns, because one of the things, actually, interestingly enough, Wacomico County Sheriff Mike Lewis has criticized the new gun regulations, questioned whether or not there should be a limit of, say, 10 rounds to a clip, amongst other things. Start with you, Jim. Where do you stand on that legislation that limited guns?
I voted against it.
And why did you do that?
Well, I did it because I believe in responsible gun ownership, and I protect the Second Amendment. Absolutely, that's exactly why. There's two different cultures of guns in our state, and certainly in the rural areas, they're a way of life. People hunt with guns. People protect themselves. Can be a slower response time from our public safety officials and the like. And also, it's a constitutional right that we've been given: responsible gun ownership. I voted against it. I voted against the number of rounds. I offered an amendment on the floor to sunset it, if in fact it did pass, that after collection data and the like, that the bill would then go ahead and expire.
Let me ask you that, but let me be more pointed about it. What do you say to the person who sends their kids to school, or who looks at, for instance, the shooting at Sandy Hook, or some of the other school shootings, or some of the other shootings, and they say, look, Second Amendment's great, but it's not an absolute, and maybe we should have some limits on this. What do you say to those people who are fearful?
Well, I understand, and that was a heinous crime. And, throughout we don't even have to go to Sandy Hook. You can look in our urban areas. Those heinous crimes happen every day to innocent people. But again, strong enforcement of mental health consciousness and awareness, making sure that our schools are safe. I voted for the budget that had $25 million in it to make our schools in Maryland safer. My opponent voted against that. So that's what I say. I say it's a horrible, terrible tragedy, but absolutely, I believe in gun ownership myself. When I lived in the Baltimore area, my dad passed away suddenly. I had a permit to carry a gun when I moved to the shore. I went ahead and let it expire. But my son Trevor, when he was 7 years old, I got him his BB gun, and he walked all the way up through the hunting rifles and the like. And I'm a strong advocate of gun ownership and the Second Amendment.
Mike, what about you? And what do you say to the parent or whoever has a child, and they say, there's some suggestion people should have, say, guns on school campuses and so on. What do you say to those people? The Second Amendment is one thing. When the Supreme Court's still sorting out just exactly what's permitted and what's not permitted, and it looks as if the law in Maryland may very well be constitutional. What do you say to those parents?
At Sandy Hook, parents took their kids to school that day and dropped them off into an environment that had the latest security hardware installed. They were locked in. They had a magnetic controlled door. They had teachers that were used to locking themselves down. They had all the protocols in place at Sandy Hook, probably more so than we even have here on the lower shore in a lot of our school districts. The one thing they didn't have at Sandy Hook was a good guy with a gun on the other side of that door. And when a criminal decides that they're going to attack a soft target, which a school is a soft target in Maryland, right now, soft targets. When they attack, there's very little that you can do if you're not prepared on the other side of that doorway. So what I'd say to a parent is, they resulted to being human shields at Sandy Hook. Teachers were covering toddlers, making sure that they were protected and getting riddled with bullets at the same time. That is not the kind of answer. And I suspect that if we could bring any of those teachers that were massacred and put them here this morning and ask them, would you have preferred to have somebody in that school, a good guy with a firearm that morning? They would have absolutely said yes. It would have been great because it could have stopped some of this.
Well, do you favor teachers having guns? Do you favor just certain personnel having guns? Some of the school shootings, there were actually people who had guns, and it didn't seem to matter because the security folks were somewhere else. But do you favor introducing guns into the schools?
What I favor, Don, is giving superintendents the liberty to protect their student bodies the best way that they see as appropriate. Each school district, and the Western Shore, it's hard for them to understand how we deal things down here because every kid's got to go through a metal detector if you live in the city. They don't understand how our classrooms are so open and such an easy area for people to access. Many schools in this country, many school districts in this country have on-staff people that have been trained and certified and regularly qualify with a firearm, and no one knows exactly who they are within the school building because that's the only way to actually provide some type of protective mechanism against an unknown threat because we don't know where the threats are going to come from. The bottom line with the bills as far as 281 are concerned and gun control in general is that when you take away the ability for a family to protect the thing that's precious to them, that's what the Second Amendment is designed to protect. It's not just about firearms ownership. It's about protecting the thing that's precious in your life. And this state will allow you to protect your gold and your silver on your way to the bank. I suspect that that's why Jim had a gun permit when he was in Baltimore, was because of the risk of taking money to the bank. But at the same time, they won't allow you to protect your 3-year-old when you go to the mall. There's something inherently wrong when the state places more value on property than they do on our children.
Jim, what about the idea do you favor having some kind of firearms inside the schools? What's your sense of
as
that?
A blanket remark, no. When I sit and look at the Homeland Security that was very lacking on the morning of 9/11 and what we had to do with the TSA and the like, and when you look at the the unfortunate tragedy, and that's what we have to focus here, these mass shootings. It's not just respectfully about schools, about malls and movie theaters and the like. I trust our law enforcement. I trust the folks that manage our schools and our commercial properties and the like. And if they think that there is an efficient solution to protect lives and property, I'm willing to listen to that. Just like we did with TSAs and having the personnel on our planes and the like, I'm willing to listen to that. I think one of the most important things is to train our teachers, to make certain that to train our teachers in being observant and see the emotional atmosphere of what's going on with a student or someone perhaps around the school. Our parents, if I'm not mistaken, that horrible individual who caused that atrocity got those guns from his mother, and that she had around the house. So, and those guns were acquired, if I'm not mistaken, for sport shooting and the like. So, having the answer to every threat in our country or in our state is, unfortunately, it's impossible. So I do not favor having armed teachers in school. I do support. I know that there's been law enforcement officers placed in schools, throughout the counties and certainly in Worcester County, and I do support that. And it's just like community policing. I support that as well. So I keep an open mind on moving forward there. And as I've already used an example, our TSA policies that have been adopted since 9/11.
One final sort of issue is this has been pitted, certainly Mike's campaign has pitted this sort of liberal versus conservative. I mean, that's sort of the division, at least that's been described in this campaign. And I'm going to start with you, Mike, since I was looking at this. What do you think is the difference between you and Jim when it comes to those particular labels, for lack of a better term?
Well, they're not my labels, but I can take a crack at it. The Progressive Maryland is probably the liberal digest, if you will, for how people vote in a General Assembly. They're the ones that give the senator a 73% rating, a lifetime rating, while he's been in the General Assembly. That same organization gives me an 11% rating on my voting, which means I must have screwed up somewhere to get 11%. But it means that the senator is very highly rated by them in contrast with myself. And that's because they look at other votes other than just the ones that the senator wants to tell people about that make him a, quote, conservative. The senator has voted for many tax increases in the General Assembly. The senator has voted for many fee increases in the General Assembly. The senator has voted for every spending bill that we've had, every budget-busting bill. The senator has voted for every bond bill that we've had. The senator has refused to vote for any reductions in spending. And there's $2.6 billion worth of spending reduction bills that crossed his plate that required a vote, and he voted against them every time. So when he's had an opportunity to show that he really is a conservative, when he's had a chance to really go on the line and stand up against like the flush tax, well, he voted for it. When he could have fought these things and stood with people that were actually against him, he chose not to do that. That's what makes him the liberal guy in this race, and that the opposing those things is what makes me the conservative.
So Jim, I respond to whatever, and again, what about that label between conservative and liberal?
Well, here we go again, name calling and the like, and that's great to have that reputation. But look, I work for one purpose, and that's the people of the Eastern Shore. I have a record of being effective, of getting the job done, where I'm able to go into a room and be persuasive and get the job done that we need to have done here on the Eastern Shore. When I look across the spectrum, Al, I voted no on issues that could be deemed progressive. That if somebody wants to use the term and the label liberal, you look at my record, I can tell you it's hardly liberal. My opponent chooses to distort my record. He chooses to go in and pinpoint certain things. But I will be honest, I did vote. Why shouldn't I be? The two taxes I voted for were the millionaire tax back when I was in the House, and that was because that was sunsetted, by the way, which retired December 31st of 2010, and that was done because I voted and argued against the IT tax that would have put onerous taxes on the IT industry in Maryland. I voted no. They turned around and passed it anyway. Mm-hmm. And when we came back, the IT industry smart. When we came back, they hired a firm. I'll get here. They hired a firm, and we went ahead and rescinded that tax to put the revenue in. It was the time when we were in a tough spot. And the flush tax, I voted for it after I was able to keep Ocean Pines, keeping their wastewater treatment plant, keeping that immune from the taxes. So, it's labeling. And if we're going to label here today, the label that I have earned is one of being effective result, and an effective leader. And I ask your listeners for their vote.
We've been talking with Senator Jim Mathias, the incumbent in state Senate race, and being challenged by Delegate Mike McDermott. Appreciate, by the way, both of you coming by, having a spirited debate. This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush, and thanks for listening.
This has been Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Chris Rank produces and is our audio engineer. Don Rush is your host. For podcasts, visit our website, delmarvapublicradio.net, or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast in iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on PAC 14. To view the schedule, visit the Daily Times or visit pac14.org.